Ti he mori ora, e na mana, e na reo, e na karangatanga maha, tēnā koutou katoa. E a kūrangatira, kia tātou e tone, ka nui taku mihi. Ta huti mai ki te tātou hui whakanui. Ka nui te honore ki te mi kia koto, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. A very warm welcome to family, colleagues, students, our public community, Chancellor John Allen, Pro-Chancellor Marianne Street, and members of the senior leadership team. Welcome everyone to the inaugural lecture of Professor John Randal from the School of Economics and Finance. Why not? I'm Jennifer Windsor, Acting Vice-Chancellor of Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington, and it's very good to see everybody here this evening to be in community to help celebrate the work and the contributions and achievements of John Randal as the university's first Professor of Teaching. I think this is going to be a fun night. John began at the university as an undergraduate student in 1992. Then he was a master's student before receiving his PhD in 2002 and joining our academic staff at that time. He became a professor in 2021. Now, in addition to his professorial role, John is currently director of our teaching intensive academic career pathway, and he's also Associate Dean, Academic Programs for the Wellington School of Business and Government. He previously was the Associate Dean Students in the Faculty of Commerce, and he's also been a member of the senior leadership team as Acting Vice Provost Academic. Now, John's research has been on econometrics, statistical models and problems, everything from estimation of financial volatility to tax compliance to examining rental rates and donation behaviour. His research seamlessly informs his teaching, which includes statistics for business and quantitative methods in finance and economics. He's also helped us all understand the good, the bad, the ugly of teaching and learning during the COVID pandemic. Now, the Teaching Intensive Pathway is a relatively new initiative, and it's designed to recognise academic staff who have chosen to focus on teaching innovation at a national and an international standard, and where they have a clearly influential impact on pedagogy in and beyond the university. And being the first professor of teaching on this new pathway, I think it's just extraordinary for us tonight to be able to recognise the contributions that John has made and the enormous leadership, credibility, and respect and renown that he brings to the university. As director of this pathway, John's role is to support colleagues on this particular career track and to help all staff understand the spirit of the teaching pathway. That the pathway has been embedded successfully is in large part due to John's ability to connect people, to grow the diversity of our community, and to support ambitious and highly successful research-led teaching. John's impacted our community in his teaching in ways I think that go well beyond his classroom pedagogy, his mentorship, and his superb academic management. And in just one of those ways is that he's brought an open public dialogue around mental health, his own depression, and personally raised more than $25,000 for the Mental Health Foundation of New Zealand in riding the Tour de France. His insights, honesty and warmth have opened the door for many in our community to engage in this dialogue. Now tonight, John is going to bring his overall insights and his deep knowledge of the university and higher education to his inaugural. Now, I've learned not to be snookered by John's very low-key style, quietness, and his genuine humility, to not be snookered into not understanding that he has something that's really significant to say, that he brings with him substantial argumentation, extremely well-formed points of view, that actually may directly and often challenge our very quick and our easy assumptions about what makes higher education tick and what makes it good. He absolutely has something to say and to argue, and I would argue that we should listen very closely tonight and that we will be the better as a community if we listen closely to a teacher, a scholar, and a university leader who is actually a pioneer. And I've stolen that word, but it's a good one. Just the other day, or earlier this week, I guess it was yesterday, we were in an entirely different context talking about the positive role of there being multiple points of lights and illumination to help guide us. But at the same time, we still needed a lighthouse to steer our way. And what I think we will have tonight in John's Inaugural is somebody who both in his personality and in his contributions has been a lighthouse of a persona and a personality. So in his Inaugural tonight, John is going to ask us that extremely simple question: what is the most important thing in the world? And he's going to tease us with his take on the future of the university and of higher education. I can't wait. Nā ko te hanore ki te whakato, ia ne aharangi, John Randal. It's my great pleasure to introduce Professor John Randal and invite him to the podium.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko inga rangi me ko te rangi te whakapaparanga mai. Engari, no pone ke ahau. He ahorangi ako ahau I Orowariki I Te Herenga Waka. Ko Suze, rawa ko Jeff, oku mātua, ko Ross, toku pāpa. Ko John Randal, taku ingoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm not going to tease for very long. He aha te mea nui o te ao, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. It is the people, it is the people, it is the people. And I realised actually I put my money where my mouth was by asking to stand rather than sit, so I could see you guys. Some thank yous to my parents for decent genes and plenty of love. To my siblings, actually, the two that I have most in mind when I say thanks, to my brother Dave and sister Millie for teaching me when and how to walk away from an argument. To my friends, and I see Ash and Steve from Wanaka, Simon, Brendan, for caring for me when I have not been super able to care for myself. My beautiful daughter Caitlin, my daughter Hulan, and my dear wife Sarah. Right. A little bit of history, a little bit of present, a little bit of future. Many colleagues here will have heard me occasionally refer to myself as a Victoria lifer. It dawned on me as I was preparing for this, my parents met here. Mum started as a student in 1969, my father Jeff in 1970. They got married soon after, and I curtailed Jeff's PhD in Germany by arriving somewhat unexpectedly. I finished Rongotai College in 1991 in a relatively small seventh form year. I think only about 60 of us, and maybe 5 or 6 came to this university. I'd been head prefect, and so it felt very much like going from a big fish in a small pond into a huge pond as a sprat, and it took me quite some time to adjust. And sort of all of these, it's one of many experiences that has given me an ability to empathise and understand what our students today are going through. I grew up in a very loving household. Mum and Dad are both trained teachers, primary school initially, but ended up both actually teaching at Rongotai College. I don't think Dad and I overlapped at all, but Mum and I certainly did. I was a pain in her proverbial as a student of German, not a completely committed one at times. The project is one of the many wonderful finds as I was preparing for this. Was sitting in a box on my shelf, and I don't think Peter Donlan is here. He marked that project and wrote enigmatic in response to a quote that I probably should have attributed to my mother and whoever else she got it from. The context was a robotics assignment, and the robot consisted of two straight lines with some sort of hinge thing in between them. And Mum, having heard me describe this robot, had clearly been outraged and thought that she would poke a bit of fun at all of it by suggesting I refer to this thing as a little acorn, when it probably didn't even deserve that mantle. I'll come back to that thing later on. The text, or the book cover there, I don't know if you can see at the top, enchanting to read, I agree. It was absolutely lovely. And it was sort of one of many experiences I had with mathematics that really sort of, there was excitement, there was sort of beauty, sort of awe-inspiring intelligence and insight that I've never really felt like I come anywhere close to, but I have enough in me to at least admire what some of mathematicians through time have produced and been capable of. About 4 or 5 years, I think, into my student journey here, I started teaching. And I didn't see Megan. Is Megan here? No. I worked for Megan Clark in Stat 193 for 4 or 5 years as a teaching assistant, and was, 5 hours a week dealing constantly with students most unlike myself. And it really, really forced me to sort of identify teaching strategies that suited them rather than had suited me. The formula on the left sort of elicits some trauma in me, and possibly does some of you as well. Not the most pleasant looking thing in the world. I could pretty much pinpoint, probably within a metre, the spot in the room I was standing when I overreacted to a student who had asked for guidance about how to actually plug some numbers into that thing and get an answer out. And we started off with 4 numbers in various places, and sort of guided her through, what do I do next, she'd ask. And when it came down to the square root of something, a single number, she said, what do I do next? And I sort of said, what? I overreacted and embarrassed her, and I think she actually complained to Megan, and we had a chat about it. That was probably almost 26 or 27 years ago. It stuck with me. And the really useful insight that gave me was that she was terrified. She literally didn't know how to do it. And I was kind of possibly imagining, what would be going through my mind if I was asking that question. And I think I was imagining some sort of laziness, or I just want you to tell me what the answer is, rather than I want you to show me how the hell do I do this under my own steam when I need to. So that was really, really valuable. Around about the same time, I met Julia, who so pleased to see you. Julia was my first favourite student, and it was quite a delight when I saw her walking down what's now called Cotton Street, hand in hand with Wellington's best bike mechanic. And so we've maintained this connection, which was quite lovely. Julia was a wonderfully committed student who tapped into me as a teacher, and it was just something I found really quite wonderful. And I hate to say it, you've set the bar, and you know it's just such a nice thing to feel useful and to feel like there's someone who wants really to make the most of the opportunity, the privileged opportunity that they have to learn. Just before I sent these slides off to our friends in comms, another student's name emerged out of the depths, and I jumped on our student records and typed the name in, and sure enough, in 1998, a student named Tanya did Stat 193 in trimester 1 and got a D. I'd actually thought it was an E, but it was a D. And in trimester 2, she got an A+, so the highest grade that we award. And that too was a really, really valuable experience for me. She'd been a regular in our help sessions, or in my help sessions, and it showed that if you create the right environment for a learner, they can learn. So thank you, Tanya, for showing that. Megan and I wrote a textbook in 2000, I think it was published in 2004. That's actually the second edition. Looks slightly more beautiful on the slide than the first edition. The first time I saw the first edition out in the open, it was being used to flag down a bus, which was kind of cool. Megan had been the sort of inspiration for the colour scheme and felt quite vindicated. See, John, if it hadn't been quite so spectacular, it might not have been as good at that particular task. The book was written to provide a cost-effective, simple, clear explanation and engaging examples for our students. The second edition there, I don't know if anyone, possibly no one here would remember, but that's laden with research or data from research of our academic community. We advertise in Uni News, send us your data and we will write textbook questions about it or using it, so that our students get to know you and your work and learn some useful stats. It was good fun to write. It was a hell of a lot of work. The NB bit, learning how to teach NB, I studied in what was the Institute of Statistics and Operations Research, and it's lovely to see Peter sitting there. He was one of the senior staff in that school who really showed what an academic community can be. They knew of each other's work, they talked to one another. There was a sort of Mexican wave of alarms going off on the computers twice a day, if my memory serves correctly, and everyone stopped what they were doing and went and had a cup of tea together. And it was quite lovely. It was useful to observe real academic leadership. Professors Vere-Jones and Vigneault literally led. They were senior staff who took that responsibility of guiding their colleagues, their institution, their fields. And that's something that I've sort of aspired to live up to in my work up to this point, and I will do so beyond. For much of my, well, half of my academic career, I've been a bog standard 40-40-20 academic. This notional split of how we allocate our time. 40% of our responsibility typically is in the classroom, 40% of our responsibility in doing original research that we see through the publication process, and 20% of the time serving our community. Beyond my PhD, I sort of dabbled in a whole range of different things, and John, one of my co-authors sitting there, I think Martin at the back, who I've published with, never really felt quite as important to me as the people I was immediately surrounded by, my students, my colleagues. I enjoyed the thrill of the chase. I enjoyed using my brain, to solve some of these problems. I despised the publication process, the length of time you wait for someone's letter misdescribing your work and saying, sorry mate, try somewhere else, and not apologising for the fact that you've waited 11 or 12 or 13 months for that effort. And so it was always, there was always a very real tension, I think a tension that our entire academic community feel to some extent or another. Some pulled in one direction, others in the opposite direction, but a tension nonetheless. The two papers on the right, I'll flick to this amazing discovery. I found this in one of my boxes this morning. Pink Floyd t-shirt and the font of Pink Floyd, The Wall. I suspect I wore that deliberately, but in any case, a colleague and I, Richard Martin, spent 3 summers manipulating the contents of City Gallery's donation box. In the sort of advertisement for this session, there's a bit of a tease. And in some ways, the fact that to an extent, the highlight of my research career was being locked in a city gallery with a hydraulic lift that would take me 4 metres up into the ceiling with a bag of tools and ball of string and camera and computer equipment, setting up monitoring device. Probably was a sign, that if only I'd felt that way about publication and about citations and other things, rather than an experience which I'd sort of likened to finally getting that splinter out of your finger, where it's just been bugging you for ages, and eventually it's out, and it's like, oh, thank God that is over. Is Colin here? Wonderful. I think this short and simple email is one of several significant things that have happened, without which I wouldn't be standing here. The university around about this time was a place I didn't feel particularly comfortable in. Sort of early in the performance-based research fund process, and as someone who felt very much like a team player, that I was setting aside my own ambitions or the work that was going to be regarded by this process. I wasn't a huge fan of some of the management decisions in this place. Colin threw me this lifeline, identified a pivot. I don't know what it was that he'd seen in me that sort of told him that I'd be well suited to this work, but it kept me here. Colin spent 41 years at this university, if I recall correctly. Gave one of the best retirement speeches I've ever had the pleasure of hearing, where he spoke quite frankly about each of the vice-chancellors he'd worked under. I almost feel like sitting down and saying, Colin, can you come up and do a rerun of it? But very big boots to fill. The Associate Dean Student's role is at the end of a chain of problem solving. if the course coordinator can't deal with it, or the program director can't deal with it, or the head of school can't deal with it, it ends up on the desk of the associate dean students. I should have known that there weren't going to be any easy jobs, and it did take a while for me to click, oh yeah, it's just the nature of the job. It was problem solving day in, day out, and I said to Jennifer, Professor Windsor, as we were sort of trying to kill some time upstairs, it was an incredibly difficult job, I realised, just as I was helping Jane recruit the next one. I had the power to say yes to just about anything, but the professional responsibility to say no to most of it. And that saying no day after day after day, turned out it was hard, and I was kind of locking it away, but it was important. I was sitting at my breakfast table one morning, and I saw an advert on Facebook saying, come and ride the 2018 Tour de France. And so many of my sort of professional experiences and personal experiences all of a sudden collided in a way that made wonderful sense. And I saw this opportunity to do something quite special, as it turned out. I applied to go on the trip and got a place, and then went to our senior leadership and said, I'd like to tell the entire university I have depression. And having reread some of the emails this morning, the response was, are you sure about that? There was quite some concern about whether or not that was a sort of healthy choice. And I should thank Professor Lana, who unfortunately is not here today, Grant Guilford, Linda Trenberth, for having that concern. I told them not to worry about it, and sort of embarked on this really fascinating process. Jared Hoffman, who was manager of student counselling at the time, said it must be really hard to talk about having depression. And I said, Jared, having depression's hard. Talking about it turns out to be quite easy. In this environment, in this institution, with the people in it, had a really just felt safe the entire time, felt well looked after, and there wasn't a single conversation I had with anyone ever that made me regret opening that can of worms. The photo on the left there, I think I'd probably have taken the sweatband off if I'd thought about it a bit more. I spent 16 hours sitting on that bike that day, I think with about 20 minutes off it. The lab were bringing me coffee from time to time, and I had just people stopping by, putting money in that bucket. $1,300 went to the Student Hardship Fund at the end of the day, and I think the other 2,000 went into the coffers of the Mental Health Foundation. Helped a couple of Form 102 students with an assignment that was due, I think, the next day. They were like, oh, great. They knew they had a captive, and I was more than happy to distract myself by talking to them. Vice-Chancellor, we need to pick that up again. Our mental health issues haven't gone away. And yet we've got interesting data that we didn't have at the time. Since I made that disclosure, as you mentioned, I've been on senior leadership team briefly covering for Stuart. I've been given all manner of responsibilities. I've been promoted to professor. So it clearly hasn't done me any harm. I realised when we some of the initiatives on return from France, I'd become very comfortable talking about myself. Colleagues seemed comfortable talking to me about their mental health. Students, I think, started being more open about it, but I was dismayed at the end of a sort of initiative that VUSA had put together, where they'd sought blogs from anyone in the community that I'd been the only staff member. So there's work to do. There's still some confidence to gain, but I hope the example of me can be useful to us. I've resisted the temptation of showing you that 18-second video, so I took a screenshot of it instead. That stage finished on an airfield, and I just couldn't help myself. I feel like actually I'm getting closer to knowing what I want to be when I grow up, but I'm not sure I feel like I've completely grown up yet. One Day Ahead is a film of the trip, 51 minutes long, hit YouTube a couple of weeks ago, and has since had, I think, 125,000 views and elicited some lovely comments from cyclists and non-cyclists alike. So if you've got a spare 53 minutes, have a look for it. It's quite lovely. Be warned, there was at least a couple of comments that said, I'm 10 minutes into this and I'm having to reorganise my day so I can finish it. So maybe leave it till an evening. The most recent period of time has been a fascinating and challenging one as a teacher. I think all of us in this community are having to teach in ways that we were not taught. The sort of the technology that was available when we were students in terms of inside the classroom, but also the sorts of things that we were using as tools to do and submit work have changed so completely dramatically. I'm teaching a subject where some of the theoretical underpinnings haven't changed for decades, if not centuries. But the way we do it in practice has changed quite dramatically. I've now got some experience with creating teaching videos, online assessment that seems to have gamified learning. The screenshot at the bottom there, I'm not sure if you can make out the details. I got a hell of a fright when I saw the grade distribution from that course, from that trimester. How the hell was I going to justify to my head of school so many A's? And when I looked at the data that our learning management system provided, I discovered that it was okay. The 619 students in the course, between them had done practice test 3 almost 10,000 times. And it's no wonder they did well in the final test. And it's just been, so satisfying to be part of that. The calculator and Eaton's tables, which I'm sure some of you would have recognised and used, been forced to use perhaps, have been replaced by tools that do all this huffing and puffing that consumed, the best part of an hour within the context of an exam. That stuff happens in seconds. And so I think it's felt incumbent on me to teach students how to drive that, how to interpret what is done, and step away from how I was shown to do it, and just really congratulate them for their good fortune that they're able to do it in a way that I wasn't. My daughters and wife have had to put up with me playing on my phone, apparently, in the evenings. We're trying to watch a show together, or I don't know, and there I am playing on my phone. Blackboard discussion board has been just an amazing part of my teaching role. Knowing that there's someone out there somewhere trying to do something I've taught. Do not stress about the child. Cry as much as you like, beautiful Brooke. Knowing that I've been able to sit there and give them real-time advice hasn't felt like an intrusion at all. It's felt like a privilege and something quite wonderful. I do love the pen and paper, though. I was very tempted to flip to the document camera and try and teach you something, but I thought, no. There's some very old school approach still, but interestingly that screenshot was taken of me doing it in my office under a camera that then gets uploaded to the internet and used by students. And that too feels, like a great step forward. Even though I'm being deprived that sort of feedback and guidance that you all are giving me, and I should have said at the beginning, this is the best attended lecture I've given in years, and it's, quite lovely, thank you. So, great oaks from little acorns grow, so suggested my mother. I was very tempted to use that as the title of this talk, but I absolutely hated the thought that anyone might think I was talking about myself. Rather, our students are our little acorns, and they may well become great oaks. I realised that when we garden, clearly not enough of you know me outside of university to know that I never garden. I always hated that sort of dirt under your fingernails sensation. But suppose I was a gardener, I don't think I'd ever assume that my plants weren't going to grow. I'd plant them, I'd water them, I'd care for them, and I'd do everything that I could to help them turn into whatever they're meant to be. And it strikes me that we don't always approach our students in that way, but we should. I stand in rooms like this with students that probably were like the one that I described earlier, terrified, maybe quite annoyed that they're being forced into a course that I'm teaching. Sometimes they say that. I hate the fact that I have to do this, but I really need your help. I feel like a lot of my role is about giving them the confidence to jump. With my favourite course, doing mathematical statistics, much like the way Peter taught me how to do it 25 years ago, I say to them, you don't have to know you can finish this problem, you just have to start it. And then you have to do the next bit and the next bit and the next bit. And if you get to the end, great. But don't not start because you can't see this thing end to end. And I imagine jumping off the top of a diving platform for the first time is a little bit like that. I hope I'm going to get this right. We'll sort out the bottom bit near the bottom. And I think that role as a teacher, and at least in my field, is in part giving students the confidence to give something a go. I tell my students when they leave looking kind of shell-shocked and a little bit sad, to imagine me playing a violin. I don't know why I've used a violin. I think possibly because I can imagine a violin being played badly. You'll see in the image I have instead put a Mongolian horse-headed fiddle, just as a tip of the hat to my lovely wife and daughter. But I asked them to imagine me playing an instrument and asked them to imagine, would you expect to leave this room being able to do it? And I think they pretty much get the point. No, this is not a subject that you inherit as you hear it. It is a subject that you have to take away. You have to make a horrible noise and practice and practice and practice until it sounds somewhat like it did when you first saw it. And again, as a teacher of statistics, I feel like to a large extent my role is trying to sort of trick them into giving things a go, to taking the approach that Julia took to her studies, and really put up with the fact that sometimes we're just not good at something for a little while, but we get there through committing to it. As Jennifer mentioned, we now have a teaching intensive pathway at this university. We're one of many who are moving in this direction. It's a very beautiful photo of most of the first 15, including Sarah, who briefed us at the beginning, making sure we knew how to get out of here if things went south. I think I've seen Amanda, David and Stephen. But a wonderful community to be part of. Catherine. It's a great privilege to lead these people, but I think the point that I would make, the thing that I'm most glad about is to be a professor on this pathway and to have each and every one of those individuals be able to have the confidence that there is a genuine route to that level for them. I think it's critically important that the institution realise this is different, that it means business, and I think by appointing a professor on the pathway in the first cohort, the university put its mana behind the pathway in a way that no individual could make up for. At a so it really is something that I think can give everyone confidence, and I'm very pleased to be in that position, but I'm pleased for them rather than pleased for myself. The pathway since in the first year has doubled. We've become more diverse. Almost every faculty in the university now has at least one appointment on the pathway. About a month ago, the second professor was appointed to it, Professor Peter Adds, our first Māori academic on the pathway. It comes at a good time for us. These are challenging times to be at a university, and I'm confident that colleagues on the pathway will be a great part of the solutions. I was very tempted to leave this slide blank. I thought, I'll put some words on it, and then I thought, I know, I can put nothing on it. It's an open question. What do we become beyond COVID? I think the pandemic has given us a really useful push into the future. Useful, but difficult. It's been a tough time, and it's been hard to see the strain that both my academic colleagues, my professional colleagues and my students have been under as they try and learn and teach in the face of challenge in our personal spaces, but also as we've tried to reinvent ourselves. As you'll have sensed, I've enjoyed some of that, and it's been really nice to be learning new tricks. But I think it's going to be hard for us to sort out where we end up, where we land. Questions of what we teach and how we teach it are really things that the academic community are going to have to deal with. How we make best use of our human and physical resources. If every lecture I gave with this, had this many people in it, I'd feel like it was a good use of my time, a good use of the space, and a great use of the student time, because clearly they would have been finding it compelling. Having 5 people in this room doesn't make so much sense. In cycling, we occasionally refer to junk miles, where you just ride your bike and don't get much out of it. I suspect we're guilty of junk teaching to an extent. We drag people across the city to teach them in a way that could be as effectively done using written resource or video resource. And I think actually in my case, I think the sort of stuff that I'm teaching, as I mentioned, you don't walk out of the room inheriting it, knowing it. And so the value of being able to replay the critical bits, pause them, try it out, seems to me like a huge step forward, rather than relying on this sort of, did you catch it? Did you get it? I'm not sure. I feel like we're, each of us, using our own sort of attributes and the nature of our field, going to have to find a way of being compelling in everything that we do. That'll take time, and I think it'll challenge us. It might not always be comfortable. I think the students have to come to the party as well. I'd note that they are learning under conditions that anyone who's been to university has not had to themselves face. Really difficult financial environment. I think a challenging social environment. These superficial friendships that really don't measure up to spending time with a person. I am guilty of liking my friends' posts and feeling to some extent like it lets me off the hook. And what I'm missing out on is deep engagement. And I think that's true for our students as well. They can't afford to live, eat, travel, and therefore they can't afford to be here at a time that's convenient to us, getting stuff thrown at them in a way that's convenient to us and not necessarily designed for them and for their constraints. Nonetheless, I see plenty of evidence that students are not approaching their study in the way that Julia did. Sorry to keep on picking on you. They have some choice. How many courses they enrol in, how they organise their engagement with those courses, whether it's coming into class, whether it's watching a video, whether it's trying an assessment at a time that doesn't create undue stress or pressure. It is tough, and I don't envy them, and I see it in my beautiful girls, the sorts of things that they had to navigate. But there is an element of poor choice going on. Some of that's on them, but also we can help with that. We need to teach them how to be successful university students in this modern age. I'm going to end there. I wouldn't say my path has been quite as erratic as that, but it's probably the most spectacular piece of road I've ever ridden, and I rode it with my wife. So there's, it's quite deliberate that this is where I end. Ride safe, everyone, and remember, he aha te mea nui o te ao, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. Ka mihi nui kia koutou.
Tēnā tātou katoa. E mihi ana ki ngā tangata whenua o tēnei rohe. E nā pō toko manawa, John Allen, ko tō ko Marianne Street, ko Jennifer Windsor, tēnā koto. E nā manuhiri, e nā aropa. O te rā, tātou katoa, kua hui hui mai nei, no mai, haere mai, ki Te Herenga Waka. For those who do not know me, my name is Mark Hickford, and I'm the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Government, Law and Business here at Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington. Before we depart this lecture theatre to partake in the celebratory refreshments on the mezzanine floor, it is my distinct honour and privilege to propose a vote of thanks for our colleague, Ahorangi John Randal. We are gathered here to celebrate John Randal and to give thanks, to express gratitude for his marvellous inaugural lecture. My greetings also to his family, his partner, to his children, to his mother, to his stepfather, and to his father, who's journeyed all the way from Canberra, and those of his siblings who could join us here. I understand that is now Edward. It is a pleasure for us to see you here this evening. Thank you. As I said, this is a moment of celebration. John Randal, in his address, and our acting Vice-Chancellor, Jennifer Windsor, have made it clear that he is an inaugural professor in the teaching intensive pathway. He has presented what amounts to a memoir and a manifesto, a steadfast commitment to others in the pursuit of learning and to this institution. He has related his early influences, his genealogy, and stories of becoming as a teacher, his research activity, his pivoting into administration. To those of us who are fortunate to know John, he is selfless as a colleague, committed to Te Herenga Waka and his communities. I see evidence every week of John striving to place the challenges of his students, his colleagues, and his institution above his own. He occasionally confesses quietly that he may do this to a fault. Through his commitments as a teacher, he endeavours to humanise the discipline of economics and finance, specifically through his focusing on statistics. He is, for instance, a devoted teacher in Quan 102, a course on statistics for business. Just yesterday evening, I encountered several colleagues up at Kelburn campus who are not associated with the Wellington School of Business and Government, from diverse disciplines, who spoke to this very fact, scattered across a day. He is enduringly deliberative and thoughtful in his teaching for others, and I say for others, very specifically. There are countless examples I could give, but there is merely one that I will invoke here today and ask for your forgiveness as I traverse it slightly in the next few moments. I have heard, for instance, that he proceeded by bicycle 96 times up Rarora Road, up Te Aro Valley, to deploy insights for his students in his teaching of statistics, to enliven it for them, to record when the darkness gathered and drew in as he rode, to record when he felt tired and when a compelling need for restfulness beckoned. He's referred to this effort in cycling as Everesting, achieving to complete an Everest challenge, riding a distance that represented ascending the vertical height of Mount Everest, some 8,848 metres. He has done this at least twice, I understand, once in the way I have just mentioned, and another time in the hub up at Kelburn campus, and you would have seen the images of that on the slideshow. That Everesting attempt in the hub began at 7 a.m, and with only a couple of short breaks, he reached the summit at 11:15 p.m. 15.5 hours of striving and commitment. Of his 3,500-kilometre Tour de France cycling tour in support of the Mental Health Foundation of New Zealand, he related how he would keep turning the pedals and admiring the views. He added, "It should be okay, I think." He is a tireless advocate for mental health and well-being, fundraising for that Mental Health Foundation of New Zealand. We have heard a little of that inspiring memoir of journeys. John is a coach and perhaps a metaphorical gardener, a climber of mountains, a far gazer from summits. He is a go-to person on matters of advice at this university. As the acting Vice-Chancellor noted, John is a source of luminosity and illumination. He is a pathfinder. I consider it personally an immense privilege to work with John when he acted as Vice Provost Academic for the university during a stint when Stuart Brock had to partake in a Marsden project of importance. It was a sheer delight for me to have his presence in our meetings on questions of learning and teaching. I value those experiences still. As you would have heard, he reflects deeply on the sociality of learning and the sociality of teaching. His citizenship and sense of service endures whether he is reflecting on teaching and learning in the tumult of a pandemic or in contributing to a meeting on financials. And I had that pleasure just a few weeks ago with our colleagues from Central Finance. John, our university, Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington, is so gladdened and heartened to have you as a member of its professoriate. When I think of what you contribute, I'm sometimes reminded of what Aeschylus, the poet, said many centuries ago. Tame the savagery of humankind and make gentle the life of this world. And I think you are one of those colleagues who make gentle the life of this world. It is a moment of celebration for us all and a joy for me to offer this vote of thanks. And so, without further ado, I ask that all of you here this evening join with me in showing our gratitude in the customary fashion. Thank you.